Dr. Washington Gladden was the minister at the First Congregationalist Church on East Broad. He was a national figure in the social gospel movement. The social gospel said it wasn't enough to find personal salvation. You had to help others less fortunate in any way you could. Dr. Gladden's sermons influenced U.S. presidents, and more than one sermon served as the foundation for Columbus city policy.
He says that religion, when it all comes down to it, is only one thing. It is about friendship. And he says it's friendship with God and with your fellow man. Every Sunday, Dr. Gladden preached two different sermons. In the morning, he would preach on principles of the Christian life, and in the evening, he would preach on social teachings. And the story goes that in the morning, most of the congregation gathered were women and raising children and families. And in the evening, many civic leaders would show up, and others from other churches would come. Many men would come to hear his Sunday evening sermons, which literally covered the gamut of different issues, everything from clean water to pure milk to streetcars to issues affecting coal miners. In the mountains in eastern Ohio and into the mountains of West Virginia, coal miners were working way below the rates they should have. There was a strike.
At one point, Washington Gladden found himself in a difficult situation. On the one hand, he wanted to defend the rights of the striking coal miners. On the other, he wanted to honor his friendship with Joseph Jeffrey, who was part owner in the mine and a member of his church.
Washington Gladden goes to Joseph Jeffrey on a Saturday night and says, "Joe, I'm going to preach against you tomorrow. I don't see any other way to do it. You're wrong. You're siding with ownership. You are ownership, and you just can't keep this going." And Joseph has a few words for him, as the story goes. And he says, I just wanted you to know, if you don't want to come to church, I'll understand, but I can't do anything but this. Story goes, Joe Jeffrey comes to church with his wife, as he always does, right? And Washington Gladden preaches his sermon. 3 days later, the strike is over. So did he affect the strike? I'd like to believe he did, in a positive way. But again, speaking of citizenship and civility, he goes to a friend, has a conversation, and says that I can't do anything but say what is the truth within me about this as an injustice in the city. But the other piece that I admire is that Joseph Jeffrey, comes to worship knowing this, doesn't bat an eyelash. He's a member of this church. The truth is, this church here at 444 East Broad was built in 1931. This is, 13 years after Dr. Gladden's death. It's built to the memory of Dr. Washington Gladden. It's built with a $250,000 gift in the heart of the Depression from Joseph and Celia Jeffrey. To me, that's one of the greatest tributes of friendship.
Washington Gladden was called Columbus's first citizen.
In all honesty, he was a friend to the city. He was an irritant at times, but our real friends sometimes irritate us and call us to higher ground, right? But I think his love of Columbus, his passion for this city being the best possible city it could be, he calls for the city to care for its poorest, to build housing and water systems and transportation systems that meet the needs of the poorest of the poor. And that's what he did for Columbus.